Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Red Dawn, the 2012 remake of the 1980s movie with the same name. Now, I have to confess, I don't think I've seen the original Red Dawn. I tried viewing it before watching this remake. I added it to my Netflix list. It was on a very long wait, and it wasn't streaming, so I checked all the nearby video stores. No luck there. I looked in all the red boxes that I knew of. Nothing. I even looked on television and on demand to see if it was playing at any time. The only showing of that was after I had planned on watching the remake, and it was at some very unreasonable time. So I was really upset that I couldn't, get more context before viewing this remake. But at the same time, it really says something when you feel like you know about a movie so much that it's almost like you have seen it. It's like what I presume, everybody knows about Citizen Kane, even if they haven't seen the actual movie. And even if I haven't seen the original Red Dawn, I know who is in it, what it's about. I know various scenes. I know who directed it. I know all the stuff about it, even though I haven't seen it. And I haven't even done any research on it either. It's just what I know from hearing about it in the past. So that just shows how iconic Red Dawn is. And from the beginning, I was honestly surprised they went ahead and made this remake. Red Dawn, whether you like it or not, it's definitely a time capsule kind of movie. It's a product of the 80s. A movie like that can only exist within the 80s. Now, not to sound like an arrogant American, but for the most part, I don't think most countries could invade the United States. But back then, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union was considered a huge threat. So the idea of them attacking us and actually landing troops in the United States wasn't too far-fetched. But why would they use the Russians now? So they obviously had to change, the villains because the Soviet Union is no longer relevant. And, originally it was China, but then in post-production they changed it to North Korea. And while North Korea can be a pain in the ass, I just don't see them pulling this kind of invasion off, even under fictional pretenses. But then also another thing that made Red Dawn very 80s-ish is this was during the age of the Breakfast Club and all these teenagers rebelling against the establishment type films that were so prominent back in the day. So as absurd as it is, imagining teenagers taking on the Soviet Union and being effective, that's the type of stuff that they would have made in the 80s, and it made sense in the context of, with so many films being about teenagers rebelling against the establishment, why not make a very large-scale action film about teenagers literally rebelling against the current establishment? So, as silly as it seems, it fit for the 80s, and I just don't think that could be pulled off now. These days, when film is much more about gritty realism, the idea of teenagers taking on any trained soldier is just retarded, and it no longer works. So, but at the same time, I have to confess, I thought the trailer looked pretty cool. So I had some hope, but it was very minimal. So I went into the film with low expectations, and you know what? I didn't think it was that bad. Now, maybe if I had seen the original Red Dawn beforehand, it would seem horrible in comparison. I often wonder what I would have felt about the Total Recall remake if I haven't seen the original film. Maybe I would have thought it was okay. I don't know. But it's not like this is good either. It's just, at the absolute worst, it's generic. At the absolute best, it's harmless entertainment. I'm trying to think how to really start this, because the problem with this level of mediocrity is that it's very, very difficult to review, because there's nothing about it that's going to stand out good, but at the same time, nothing about it is especially intolerable. It's a movie that goes through the motions. It delivers the bare minimum, but at the same time, it's not incompetent about it either. So I think the biggest complaints I've heard about Red Dawn is the acting and the dialogue. Well, for the most part, the only time when the dialogue bothered me was in the very beginning during a football game where it was overly testosterone-filled, and it just was really cheesy and over the top. But after that, it seems like the dialogue evened itself out, and it it didn't really stand out to me either way. Even the big cheesy patriotic speeches, they were never overtly corny. They weren't inspiring either. So if I compared it to, let's say, Transformers 3, where there would be a big speech, it's less rousing, but at the same time, it's less annoying and phony. So it just didn't really leave any kind of impression on me. The acting is acceptable, but at the same time, nobody really has a lot to do. The person who's gotten the most flack is Josh Peck, who plays the younger brother, and he probably deserves that because he definitely gives the weakest performance. As a whole, I thought he did fine. He has probably more acting to do than anybody else, but there are times when he just doesn't seem to know what he's supposed to emote. So, for example, when he accidentally gets somebody killed, he goes up to somebody who is close to that victim, and I guess he's supposed to be conveying, guilt, sadness, whatever, but instead he just has this real blank expression on his face, as if he's not really sure what he's supposed to be feeling. And there are a few times when it's just like the actor needed better direction. So I'd actually blame the director more than the actor. But even that was just a few moments. For the most part, I thought he was acceptable. Chris Hemsworth is pretty much playing Thor. He's a decent enough lead, but I feel that sort of persona has gotten old. He needs to do something else. Believe it or not, he can play different kinds of roles. But it seems like since doing Thor, and I'm not even sure if he did this before or after filming Thor, it just seems like that's all he's been doing since then. And then the rest of the cast, like Josh Hutcherson, is that his name? The kid from the Hunger Games, they're fine. They don't stand out. My biggest complaint actually is with how by the numbers the drama is. I can't stand it when you have a big, spectacle type film, but it's like they feel the need to have some sort of character drama, so they just take the big book of cliches, pull out a scenario that we're used to, and then make that the big character arc. Probably one of the most glaring examples of this was 2012. I couldn't stand any of the character-oriented scenes. It was only watchable when shit was blowing up and falling apart all around him. And this is one of those types of films where, all right, so the whole setup is after Chris Hemsworth and Josh Peck's mother dies. Chris Hemsworth, I don't remember any of their names, the characters' names. He kind of abandons them and joins the Marines. And he comes back, and his dad is sort of distant towards him. His brother's pretty resentful. There's inevitably going to be a scene where the brother's like, "You were never there for me," and stuff like that. And it's just like, I can't stand that cliched kind of drama. It gets so old. It's a desperate attempt at providing dramatic tension. And it just, I don't know, I wish there was more inspiration when it came to writing these characters. It's just become too much of a cliche by this point. And of course, there's got to be a tacked-on love interest for no reason whatsoever, because she's such a small part of the movie. Chris Hemsworth has a love interest, this girl who's attracted to him, and he kind of rejected her as a kid. And so now they're sort of making up for lost time, and it's just another very cliched, conventional romance that wasn't necessary. Now, what makes this more tolerable than most films like 2012 is it never lingers on this too much. It'll have a scene where, the brother's being all angsty, but then it will immediately go to the next action scene or continue to develop the thin story. But it never spends too much time with the characters to where they start really becoming obnoxious. So it's like, why even bother with this to begin with? I'll tell you why. Because most writers, especially hired gun type writers like Evan Kruger, they see people complain about the lack of character development in spectacles, so they try to do something, but unfortunately they don't realize that they're just beating a dead horse. So they just go, they get the most conventional type of setup possible, and that's your character arc. So that was problematic. And when it came to the action, I thought the opening invasion was pretty cool. It's not great. The shaky camera work is a bit too obvious. I don't like movies that overly use that. For example, like one of the opening shots is a bunch of paratroopers filling the sky, and it's obvious they're using CGI. But at the same time, it seems like that was the most planned out action sequence. So it's fairly elaborate. You have, like, for example, this chase scene where somebody gets knocked out of the back of the truck, smashes into the car behind them, which causes an accident, or at one point Chris Hemsworth drives his vehicle into the vehicle in front of him, which rams a paratrooper who's about to hit ground. It's nothing spectacular, but at least it seems like they're using their imaginations to create action sequences. After that, it just becomes typical gunfights, explosions. Nothing stands out, but at the same time, it's not so poorly directed that it becomes incomprehensible or boring. And I think that's really Red Dawn's saving grace, is I was never bored. I can't say I was ever excited, but it is, I think, in a lot of ways, the most perfectly paced kind of film. It never slows down to where it starts getting boring, but it's never in such a hurry to get itself over with that it starts becoming exhausting. It'll speed up, then slow down a little bit so we can catch our breath, and speed up again. And for the most part, it always seems like something is happening. So that's why I didn't hate Red Dawn. It was one of those movies, I think, that it goes down smoothly, but at the same time, nothing about it's going to stand out, and I'm not going to remember a damn thing about this. But at the same time, I'm not going to think of it as a bad movie either. It's just one of those films I describe as, flavorless but edible. So I wouldn't recommend watching this in the theaters. At the absolute most, I'd say it's a solid rental, especially if you haven't seen the original Red Dawn. Although if you haven't, I might go ahead and watch the original first. If you have seen the original and have no interest in viewing this remake just for that reason, it's not good enough for you to change your mind. So I wouldn't bother unless if curiosity ever gets the better of you. I don't think it's bad enough to completely avoid either. So is there anything else I could say? I figure if I watch the original Red Dawn and I hate it, and then that's always a possibility. For example, I couldn't stand George Romero's The Crazies, which was supposed to be a cult classic. I'll probably still concede that it is much more iconic than this remake. There's going to probably be stuff that will stand out much more, even if it's the bad stuff. I remember when The Crazies had its remake, I conceded that the remake was much better in terms of how well made it was, but at the same time, I automatically think of the original Crazies before thinking of the superior remake, just because there's just something more memorable about the original. But then, of course, best case scenario, I love Red Dawn, and it'll just blow this remake out of the water. So that's all I have to say. I did not do a written review, but please check out my website, where I do written reviews, and follow me on Twitter. I plan on getting back on critiquing the critics early next year. I wanted to take the rest of this month off because I have inventory at work, and that sucks balls. So I'm really busy. I don't have a whole lot of time to do anything. I'm also trying to get through the Golden Critic Awards as fast as I can. So that is all. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys later.